Traffic gets heavy Cumberland to Central, then from North Avenue to the Burns Circle. Trip time is 29 minutes O'Hare to downtown. 15 from Montrose, 8 in the Express. Outbound 21 minutes downtown to the airport. The inbound Eisenhower has delays starting just before the tri-state. It's 34 minutes from 390 to downtown. Outbound, it's 28 minutes. Inbound Stevenson, your travel time from the Veterans Memorial Tollway to Lakeshore Drive is 28 minutes. The Ryan, 17 minutes, 95th to downtown. I-57, 11 minutes, I-80 to the Verge. Bishop Ford, 14. That's traffic. I'm Jim Calamonte on AM 560, The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. AM 560 Weather Center forecast. Partly sunny and cooler. I-41 today. 33 at O'Hare. Next news at 8. Breaking news as it happens. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560, The Answer, online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, and your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com.
From the Matrix Home Solutions studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
When you've got questions, he always has an answer. It's Sean Hannity, this afternoon at 2 on AM 560, The Answer.
And Amy found out from Equity Toolkit being promulgated by the educrats in Arizona that white babies become racist as young as 3 months old.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a memory from when you were 3 months old, Dan? No, nobody does.
Sure, but that's how pernicious being white is. You don't even realize you're a racist because you can't remember being 3-year-old, but it's hardwired into your DNA. That's the position of the left. The toolkit teaches, among other things, that babies start to become racist at just 3 months of age. The toolkit insists that babies must be spoken to about race as, quote, letting children draw their own conclusions based on what they are, unquote, leads to racism.
I mean, you can't eat, you can't control your bowels, but you can control your beliefs at 3 months old. Okay,
Who's buying into that? The Equity Toolkit also suggests white children specifically are stronger biased in favor of their own race by the time they are 5 years old, but claimed that such a phenomenon does not exist among Black and Latinx children. Of course it doesn't. Which brings me to a very interesting piece by Eric Levitz in New York Magazine. And this is an interview he did, in part informed by an interview he did with David Shore, who is a progressive Democrat operative. He was part of the Obama 2012 campaign. He runs a leftist nonprofit now. And the Republican Party has the prospect to be a lot stronger than some people might think. And it's largely because of Trump. This is an analysis, a threat assessment, essentially from the left, which is interesting. And by the way, it's interesting also how much more accurate a depiction of the landscape, and this is data-driven, you get from a David Shore leftist operative than you do from the establishment Republican Party. Interesting. He writes, even if a majority of non-white people agreed with liberals on all these issues, the fundamental problem is that Democrats have been relying on the support of roughly 90% of black voters and 70% of Hispanic voters. So if the Democrats elevate issues or theories that a large minority of non-white voters reject, it's going to be hard to keep those margins because these issues are strongly correlated with ideology. And black conservatives and Hispanic conservatives don't actually buy into a lot of these intellectual theories of racism. They often have a very different conception of how to help the black or Hispanic community than liberals do. And I don't think we can buy our way out of this trade-off. Most voters are not liberals. If we polarize the electorate on ideology, or if nationally prominent Democrats raise the salience of issues that polarize the electorate on ideology, we're going to lose a lot of votes. Basically, we have this small window right now to pass redistricting reform and create states. And if we don't use this window, we will almost certainly lose control of the federal government and not be in a position to pass laws again, potentially for a decade. In terms of putting numbers on things, I think if we implemented D.C. and Puerto Rican statehood and passed redistricting reform, that would roughly triple our chances of holding the House in 2022 and roughly the same in the Senate. So Donald Trump is unpopular, he goes on, and he does pay a penalty of that pay a penalty for that relative to a generic Republican. But the voters he's popular with happen to be extremely efficiently distributed in a political in political geography terms. So I think the Trump era has been very good for the Republican Party, even if they now momentarily have to accept this very, very, very thin Democratic trifecta. Because if the coalition changes are durable that he's describing, the GOP has very rosy long-term prospects for dominating America's federal institutions. Isn't that an interesting perspective? It seems to be like the one we've been offering for some time on this show with respect to Trump reshuffling the deck and with respect to the takeaways, even in defeat in November, of increasing the percentage of black and Latino voters at the presidential level. Now, even regaining control and regaining and enjoying dominance of the federal institutions, if David Shor were to be proven correct, that doesn't necessarily mean we know what Republicans will do, and it doesn't necessarily immediately translate into regaining balance, if not control, of all the cultural institutions dominated by the left. So this is a long fight. But it is interesting that you have a political operative on the left offering real concern about the hegemony of Republicans, short of moving D.C. and Puerto Rican statehood and redistricting reform as sort of contained in that legislation that passed the House yesterday. Very interesting. For more on all of this and a couple other topics too, including one she's written about recently about presidential vernacular, we're pleased to be joined again by our friend Amity Shlaes, board chair of the Calvin Coolidge Presidential Foundation, winner of the Hayek Prize, and best-selling author of The Forgotten Man, A New History of the Great Depression, and Great Society, A New History. Amity, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Oh, I'm glad to be with you. Hi, Amy.
Hi.
Before we get to your piece about the use of the word great or the overuse of it, particularly at the presidential level, what about the political landscape as you're hearing David Shor describe it in that piece in New York Magazine I mentioned, and just your own handle on what you think it is right now?
Well, generally the left is more afraid of the right and more confident in a conservative or common sense values power to win American votes than the right is. That's what's interesting, right? Republicans are kind of rambling all over the place, trying to sound like Democrats often on the minimum wage, for example, or with the child allowance of Senator Romney. That's just Democrat light. And but Republicans Democrats like to get Republicans out of their traditional position because it's such a good one. We have an article, the co-editor of this Coolidge autobiography and I coming out about how Gerald Ford was tricked and Jimmy Carter did real well by taking the empty space on Gerald Ford's right. It's a bit like basketball or any other sport. When you leave tennis, you leave the space open foolishly. Someone else is going to take it. Of course, Jimmy Carter wasn't a right-wing guy, but in the election, he played the right, and that helped him to win. And that was after a scandal, too, of course. But I want to say one other thing vis-a-vis suppression and the general mood. Even Calvin Coolidge has been suppressed. We had a Facebook tweet of a Calvin Coolidge quote where he said, presidents shouldn't talk a lot because sometimes when they talk, that fomented hatred and jealousy. And this Facebook refused to allow us to promote.
Well, hey,
Coolidge's supposed to be milquetoast, right?
Well, his nickname is Silent Cal, and they're going to make sure he lives down to that nickname, Silence. Knows nothing from Calvin Coolidge. No,
but you know what I mean about
yeah.
The left sometimes understands the power of the right, and I don't mean the evil right. I mean the common sense, strong right that understands the government spending too much money, or that extreme versions of affirmative action, intersectionality aren't good for black or white. Most people kind of understand that. So, and the left gets that most people kind of aren't that crazy.
Well,
that they're going to worry about their words to this extent. We're all in the same country, and we generally want to help one another.
well, somebody that seems to get that, even if you don't always agree with his rhetorical choices, is Trump. And it was an interesting piece by Dan Henninger in the Journal about that and about his CPAC speech on Sunday, which is still being dissected. And he just pulled a lot of what Trump said in terms of policy vision for the Republican Party, the way forward for the Republican Party, including but not limited to Trump. And Henninger makes the point that, amid some of the bluster and unique communication style, is a lot of stuff that that was popularized during Reagan. He quotes him. It means low taxes and eliminating job-killing regulations. Trumpism. It means. Let me just finish.
Could I pick a bone with you on that?
Well, let me just finish what Henninger cites, and then I'll let you pick that bone. It means strong borders. It means no riots in the streets. It means very strong protection of the Second Amendment. It means support for the forgotten men and women who've been taken advantage of for so many years. It means a strong military, and so on and so forth. So, so go ahead, pick that bone.
Well, actually, first I'll say that's what Calvin Coolidge was for, and that's how come he won. I came on because I really like this book. I'm writing an intro to an old autobiography. It was published in '29 by Calvin Coolidge, but it is the best primer on common sense for your kids. Because Coolidge wrote great. He wrote short, clear sentences. He had beautiful homiletic prose. And he just told the story of what America was and how he rose in it. And what he did is necessary, and here comes the bone. Coolidge actually saved government money. He actually cut the budget, and he actually cut taxes dramatically. And my point is just that taxes and cutting the government can't be like a throwaway line behind a child credit. It has to be these ideas, the basic principles of American growth, have to be number one. So it's up to other Republicans to take very, very seriously the fight about the capital gains tax, for example. Other people say, oh, yeah, that's a rich person's tax, so let's raise it. It is not a rich person's tax. It is a tax on job creation in the United States. And so, I don't think there's an economist even on the far left, Dan and Amy, who would deny that if you cut the U.S. capital gains rate to 2%, we would have an ocean of international money and an ocean of activity here in the United States that would provide jobs for everyone and educational training for those who want it and need it. So they're just scared to say, cut capital gains because, that sounds like we're serving the rich. Oh, my God. So we have to be a little bit more leaderly on this and not cower behind social measures pretending that they are economic growth optimal.
I'm glad you picked that bone because I'm in complete agreement. Absolutely. And Trump was a failure on this. Yeah, Trump is a failure on the spending side, like so many Republicans for so many generations.
One thing about Coolidge after the scandal, which they had a terrible scandal in the 1920s, Teapot Dome, and you're like, I can't even remember what that is, right? Well, Teapot Dome got at the heart of the Republican goals because the Republicans were for privatization in that time after a big war and a big government, World War I. So they said, let's put oil in private hands to be managed. So you're saying you want to privatize or lease to private parties in that instance? You better privatize right and not just give out the money like Vladimir Putin to your friends. Right. And yet the Harding administration did that. That's why Teapot Dome matters. It besmirched free market principles and the very idea that the private sector could do a good job with such projects. So Coolidge became president when Harding died all of a sudden, and he had to clean all this up. And the way that he did it was he hewed to the policy written in the platform. So my own view is this is a good year for Republicans to write a real platform and take it seriously and put markets on the top. Because they don't know what they think, and that means it's all about personalities. And you can't go forever on personalities. Setting aside President Trump or not, you have got to have something truly bold and actually show you believe in it.
Absolutely, and also you have to stop starting from the premises of the left and trying to meet them a half or a third of the way, which you've seen Mitt Romney and other senators do on the minimum wage, which you've seen them do on spending hundreds of billions, if not trillions more of government funding money, which you've seen them talk about doing on a range of issues too, then you're always advancing their flag just more slowly, and there's little distinction.
Just more slowly, right? Yeah, I agree. Well, yeah, and that's what happened with Ford after another scandal, Watergate. He was so eager to be in the center. He was a really good, Ford understood the Senate and the House very, very well. That's where he came from, the Hill. And so he went political rather than economic. He was also, remember the whip inflation now buttons. He also was wrong on economics. That hurt too. But you don't want a Ford situation. You want a Coolidge situation. And this little book explains, all about that. Coolidge, by the way, was pretty wonderful on civil rights. When a black man tried to run for office in New York State, a Republican wrote Coolidge and said, we can't allow this. And Coolidge published a response in the paper saying, I said, I'm just amazed you even dare to say that. I saw the black troops come home from World War I. They were wounded. We didn't have antibiotics. I mean, you can imagine what it was like to come back from World War I with a festering wound. And they might not be able to work their whole lives, and they all served so nobly. But Coolidge was for border restrictions, which is interesting. He said America needs a time to settle. The people who are here need to settle. We're all in the same boat here, and we have to help one another. But that doesn't mean we can always absorb everyone all the time. He was not a free immigration person. So that's kind of interesting, too, for those who have that view.
She is Amity Shlaes, and it's always an education with her. Board chair of the Calvin Coolidge Presidential Foundation, winner of the Hayek Prize, best-selling author of books including The Forgotten Man, A New History of the Great Depression, and Great Society, A New History. Amity, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
I'm thrilled to be there.
Thank you. And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
You've made the switch, and it feels so good. You've switched to Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Attention maintenance coordinators. If you manage an industrial facility, then you know how critical it is to manage a consistent maintenance staff. During outages, when you're shorthanded, Vans has your back.
Hi, I'm Dave Van Camp, president of Vans Industrial. Whether you need one person for 8 hours or a large crew for a month, we can supplement your maintenance team. Our personnel are trained mechanics familiar with all material handling processes. Our expertise extends to fabricating, sheet metal, millwright, and ironwork jobs. Our men can work alongside your repairmen, or we can provide an entire crew complete with equipment depending on your requirements.
Vans uses only the best and safest union-trained mechanics, insured at the highest level, to perform the job right. Call 833-VANS-IND to schedule your maintenance team. That's 833-VANS-IND. Or visit vansindustrial.com. That's VANSindustrial.com. Vans Industrial, working safe since 1964.
Right now, Allstate has almost as many ways to save as there are types of music. Save for being a new customer. Save more for adding DriveWise. And save even more for driving safely. Visit Allstate.com or contact your local agent to get a quote. Find out how much you can save today. Allstate. Now that should be music to your ears.
Not available in every state. New customer savings based on early signing discount. DriveWise is an optional feature. Savings vary based on how you buy. Subject to terms and conditions. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates, Northbrook, Illinois.